Greetings to one and all. It's your old buddy Jay here, coming at you with another episode of Countermeasures J Play. Countermeasures J Play. I've just finished playing Star Wars Outlaws. It took about 22 hours start to finish, something like that. And I just, with all these things, I sort of upload my gameplay and everything, and then I do like a little review at the end to just kind of summarize whether or not this game is any good and whether or not I've totally wasted my time. So, is this game any good? I've been playing it on and off for the last 2 or 3 weeks. And during that time, there have been moments where I've convinced myself I'm having a good time. And there are bits in it that are good. There are no bits in it that are great by any means. And there's a lot of problems with it. And it's not just about the functionality and how the game works as you're playing it, the mechanics, etc. It's also heavily an issue with the writing. So I started making notes and then I lost track. And then as I was going through, I thought, oh, I should mention that and I should definitely say something about that. And then eventually they just kept stacking up and stacking up. And all these little bits. It's like death by 1,000 cuts. So to start at the beginning, the game is basically about this girl called Kay Vass. She gets into trouble at the start where she gets a death mark on her. She escapes Canto Blight, which is the gambling planet from The Last Jedi. And she's a wanted person. And the rest of the story is about her trying to clear her death mark, but also going back to Canto Bright, whatever, and robbing the person that gave her the death mark in the first place. And as the story unfolds, all manner of excitement and fun happens. Which doesn't really, but that's basically the story in a nutshell. The problem is that because the way it's written and because the way that the story very quickly jumps to her being on the run, you kind of don't have enough time to let things resonate or for you to get to know the characters. You don't feel any kind of connection to them early enough on. Or certainly to Kay Vass, that you could care whether or not she lived or died. She's not particularly likable. She's just generic woman in main role. It's a kind of Tomb Raider sort of approach. She is generic Disney character. She's meant to be an outlaw, but she never actually does anything that an outlaw does. Her little creature thing, whatever his name is, Nix, he goes and steals stuff for her. And he can only steal from certain people, but we can talk about that later. She's not really an outlaw. She's just on the run for something that you kind of think at the start is a little bit sort of throwaway. So the story, the initial plot, kind of takes a bit of a dip right at the start, where you kind of think, is this person, the things that she's done, does it qualify that she should have a death mark and go on this big adventure of like trying to clear her name? Nothing happens at the start where you kind of think, oh, I'm going off on a 20-hour adventure now. It just kind of, before you've really had time to think about the plot, it's moved on to the next thing. So you're like, oh, but doesn't that mean, and then suddenly it's kicking into the next thing. You're meeting new characters. You go to lots of different planets. There's like 5 different planets. And you're doing all this busy work on the side where you're starting to build up reputations with different gangsters on different planets. And that reputation system kind of then leads into where you can go and buy merchandise, things like that. And as the story unfolds, you kind of do a few of those missions. Eventually, you're hired to go back to Canto Bright, whatever, and steal from the person that you originally were caught stealing from. But in order to do that, you need to put together a squad. So you need like a guy who's good with mechanics, someone who makes a bomb, a big robot guy, all the usual kind of tropes. And your mission is then to go out and find them. Spoilers, you find them. And in the end, and this is total spoiler, so fast forward about 10 seconds. In the end, you kill everybody and you rob the vault, and everyone dies. The main bad guy dies. He's hardly in it really. He's just a sort of presence at the start, a couple of sprinkles in the middle and at the end. Everyone dies and you escape, and there's no kind of indication about where you're going or what you're doing. You're back where you started in the on Canto Bright, just kind of pissing around. So like, there's no her story arc ends up in the same place it does at the start, other than she finds her mother. That is the story. The character interactions between each other are just not convincing. The character acting is great. The voice acting excellent, like really good. They have no chemistry together. So when she meets somebody who's like on the bad guy side and they're arguing about stuff, you kind of half don't take any of it seriously. When she meets kind of characters that are you're meant to have an emotional connection with, it doesn't feel right. There's something not quite right about it. She instantly becomes friends with some people, and other people she's kind of got problems. It's just, and I know it's a video game and not to take it too seriously, but if you're going to set up this big narrative, you have to have the right structure, and the payoff with those conversations and interactions are what drive the plot forward. This is how this is written. Here's the story. This is what we're going to do. And there's a scattering, a little sort of smatter of people who you pick up along the way who could or could not be there. It makes absolutely no difference to the story, other than a guy needs to build a bomb, so they backtrack and add on like 5 missions where you have to find him. I just don't understand some of the things they do. It's just like, I don't understand why they needed those characters for the end part. It doesn't really make that much sense. They could do it a different way. To spend so much time recruiting these characters. So I have a big problem with the plot and the story. The character acting, like I said, is really good. The characters themselves, individually, I thought they're quite cool. They're not fleshed out anyway. Kay Vass is not fleshed out whatsoever. Her character is just like I said, just generic person. She just doesn't there's nothing interesting about her to make you want to go on this journey. She's boring, basically. The most interesting character is the ND5 character, who's like the robot he goes through a character arc of being like a murderous robot who's being used as an enforcer, and then eventually, spoilers again, he becomes free at the end, and that's a far more interesting story. And the others are sort of throwaway. It doesn't matter. So that's the basic. Characters and plot are substandard. Well, actually, characters are good. Plot is substandard. Acting good, but it's like, I don't know. They're all good actors, but they've been given a load of trash to read. So then you move into, I could just talk about this all day because there's so many problems with it. So let's just talk about the day they all sat down at the very first Star Wars Outlaws meeting and said, what do we want in this? Everybody brainstormed all the things they like in a game like this. So they did this. On the wall, they wrote Uncharted and climbing. They wrote Tomb Raider with quips and going through narrow doorways. They definitely wrote Jedi Survivor with, where they've also used the Uncharted mechanic to do climbing and stuff like that. Much better, I'd just like to say. That mechanic in those games works much better. In this, it just is trash. Like the way she interacts with objects when she falls on them, she sort of slides off them, and because all the artifacting and the way that those are constructed don't allow for her to interact. She has no animation for kind of slipping off stuff, or kind of like if she falls off a ladder onto a box, she'll awkwardly just sort of jerk off to the side, and it's not like, it doesn't feel natural. So there's like, it hasn't really been fleshed out. Like with Uncharted, if Drake falls off something, you genuinely feel like he's landed on something, or he crushes something, or he falls. There's a feeling of connecting to the world that this doesn't have. So they definitely said Uncharted and Jedi Survivor for that kind of like connectivity, which doesn't work. They definitely said, oh, we like the shooting system in Red Dead. Yeah, okay. So in parts of the game where you're going along your shoot meter, your dead eye, fills up, and then eventually you can do that. That's fine. It doesn't work on everybody, but that's fine. They wholesale ripped it off. Then they also said, oh, in GTA, you can ride around on a motorcycle. So we basically give Kay a motorcycle. Now, the idea being, this is the first open world Star Wars game. So we want to make it as big as possible, as vast as possible. And they give you a motorcycle to do that, a flying hover bike, a speeder or whatever. Great. I mean, I love that idea. They can make the planets massive. Like when you land on Tatooine, it's huge. You can go all through the desert and, really cool, really great ideas. Just a vast open space everywhere, and just really, really great to have this speeder to be able to do that. You can only interact with the speeder. You can't interact with anything else. There are much cooler speeders flying by. Nope, you can't get in those. There are much cooler like ships, like Luke's land speeders there. There's like Imperial troop transports. Can't get in any of them. Even when you're riding along, someone comes alongside you and is shooting from their speeder. You cannot shoot from your own speeder. You have to stop, get off your speeder, and then interact with the person who's shooting at you. What? Why doesn't your your speeder have a gun on it? If you had a gun on it, you'd have these cool sort of bits like in Return of the Jedi where you're flying along and you're shooting each other. None of that happens. So that's a massive fail. I mean, I could go on with the amount of things that have been ripped off from this. It's just completely bonkers. If I see the animation of a person going into an air vent and climbing a ladder one more time, I'm going to jump out of the window. In this game, that must happen 1,000 times. And I was mainlining the main story. There's a few side missions that I did. There's a lot of other side stuff to do. I mean, I don't know how many more air vents she's got to climb through in her lifetime, but they're stacking up because there are a shitload in this game. And it's just, as soon as I would see those animations, one of them would be silvery shiny because you're on the Death Star, not. One of them would be, oh, you're in a cave, so there's a cobweb, but it's the same again and again and again. And there's a bit where you're walking along and you see people talking as you're walking by. It's such an old mechanic that, like, doing it every now and again, fine. But every single mission, there is a part where that is the structure. You start the mission, you're sneaking around, you're going through a lot of air ducts. You eventually get to where you want to go. It's okay because you're not allowed to trip the alarms, but that's fine because all the stealthy stuff you can do, that's fine. Then you trip the alarms, you have a fight, and you leave. That is every single mission of this game from start to finish. That is the structure of every mission. It is just like, apart from the space missions, obviously. But then you've got things like the stealth. So if you're going to rely on your game having a shed load of stealth in it, make the stealth really, really good. Hitman, amazing stealth. The AI on the people walking by, they hear things, they change their patterns. You're watching people. They don't just go back and forth. So you watch their patterns. They change that. They're on some kind of rotation, especially the newer ones. The AI is smart. It works out where things have been changed or moved. It interacts with things. If it finds a dead body, it alerts everybody. None of that happens in this. If you take somebody down, you cannot hide the body. So as soon as if you're in an awkward position where you've taken somebody out, you try and hide the body, it can't be done. Somebody immediately sees it or is alerted to it. Unless they're like right next to it, you knock somebody out and they're standing right next to you and they don't hear anything because the AI isn't programmed to pick up on the sound. So I noticed that whether I was creeping or whether I was walking made zero difference whatsoever. They didn't hear the sound of your footsteps. They didn't seem to interact with anything. If you were picking stuff up or making noise, they didn't even. None of the characters, other than maybe the robots did. That might have happened once, but that might have been a fluke. Majority of the time, they just don't hear you. You can run up behind someone and just punch them in the back of the head from miles away, and they will not turn around. So that's messed up. While we're talking about punching, I mean, I'm bagging on this game now, but I feel like I've been holding in 20 hours where I need to vent. So on the subject of fighting, Kay is like a mid to late 20s, early 30s maybe character, okay? Let's say mid 20s. Not that you'd ever know it. Her face looks like a sort of 80-year-old potato. But let's say she's 27, okay? She punches everybody. So she hits someone on the back of the head, knocks them out. I understand that. If there's a woman or a guy sort of coming around a corner and you've got to do a quick interaction where she hits them with her fists and knocks them out, that I can understand. She's fully doing the same thing to stormtroopers in full body armor. She's doing it to everybody, like when they've got helmets on. It's just so jarring. It's like at no point did I ever feel like, uh, well, at those moments, it just broke the immersion. I was like, there's this 20-year-old sort of like walking around and like knocking out like 5 or 6 stormtroopers in full armor. It's so weird. Um, why they just didn't give her a taser, I don't know. She's meant to be this kind of cool outlaw. If she had this cool little taser where she just tasered people instead of like punching them in the face, I mean, her knuckles must just be bruised and bloodied and swollen all over the place because I mean, I must have like knocked out 100 stormtroopers in this game, and it's just every time, from the first one to the last one, was just an absolute joke. Like, I mean, I know it's a video game, so it's like, oh, it's a video game, it's fine, but like, be realistic in the world you're creating. Like, we know that like these people are wearing body armor because they're meant to be soldiers. They're meant to be like the white knights of space, the bad guys, whatever. And I mean white knights as in they're like knights that are white, not good. And she's just going around like hitting them in the face with her bare hands, and it's just absolutely comical. She doesn't. You could have just given her a stick. Just a stick would have been fine, but it just took me out of it every time. I mean, I go back to, and I often reference this, I think it was Watch Dogs 2. I played that entire game. There's only like 2 parts in that game, I think, where you have to kill someone. In the rest of the game, you can, as soon as I got the taser, which you could get pretty early on, as soon as I got the taser, I just tasered everybody. I didn't kill anybody. I tasered everyone. I wanted to knock them out. I wanted to see if I could get through the whole game without killing anyone. I think there's 2 places where you can't, where there's like a car or crash, and then you're forced to shoot somebody at some point. But the majority of the time, you get to tase, and it was really cool. And the stealth was much more fun because of it. Because I thought, oh, I could just barrel through these sections and shoot everybody, but I don't want to kill anyone because I'm a good person. So I want to taser everybody and knock them out. And that's the kind of feeling that you get from that kind of mechanic. In this, like, if you've got your stun blaster on your gun so you can stun people, but it takes so long to charge up. Like, why would you're not going to sit there for 10 minutes and wait for it to charge up so you can then do the next person, because you've got 30 people to get through. You're just not going to do it. They should have done something better with that. Now, it might be that there's an upgrade for the gun that speeds that up and things like that. Not in my playthrough. And I upgraded the gun fairly decently. And at no point did I come across anything that said, oh, you can upgrade your stun thing so that it speeds up, or you get more than 1 shot. You get 5 shots instead of 1. Whatever. They didn't do any of that. So that sucked. The gun was as powerful at the start as it was at the end. So if it took me 5 shots to shoot a stormtrooper in the helmet, which, by the way, I can take them out of my fists in 2 punches, so whatever. But like, if it took me 5 shots at the start, it took me 5 shots at the end. At no point did I ever feel, oh, I need to upgrade my gun. I did go through just because like the game mechanic said, oh, here's a thing that you can upgrade, because that's what these kind of games have. So I went through and I upgraded my gun. I mean, maybe it shaved seconds off the time it was reloading or cooling down, or giving me the kind of active reload again, something which was just taken from Gears of War, where you're fighting, your gun overheats. You can wait, or you can time the reload exactly at a moment where the active reload resets everything and you can go. So there was a bit of that, which, I kind of, which is fine. But again, another stolen mechanic. And I say stolen because a lot of these games do actually switch ideas around, right? So they do, like, no one owns this stuff. Well, maybe they own a little bit of it, like when it comes to the Nemesis system, but no one really owns these things. So you can cobble them all together. But like, my question is, should you? Because some of these things just feel shoehorned in there because it's something someone played once that they liked, not necessarily whether or not it did this game any justice. And I would say that some of these things don't. I mean, just don't have the blaster overheat, or give yourself 20 shots and there's a reload. There was no reload button because it's obviously a blaster, so they had to do something, and it's the active reload to let it cool down. Fine, whatever. So with all of that going on, I can bang on about the mechanics all you like. The space battle was fine. I must admit that, like, Starfield probably could take a kind of leaf out of the book when it comes to this kind of gameplay, but I do feel that like the Star battles were fine, but again, you didn't have to do enough of them. That when I flew into like a big ship graveyard where I had one mission to do, and I looked around and there were like 50 things to do in that area that you could go and land on the ships and go around and collect junk and whatever. I just didn't want to do any of that. It was just busy work. I ignored all of it and I just went for the main story. Um, Talking about collecting stuff, you're constantly going around collecting junk. Right, the junk is a certain amount of things that you can use to kind of upgrade your tools. You can do it to upgrade your weapons and your ship and all that kind of stuff. Fine, there are bits that you can do. Most of it is just crap, and then you sell it in order to, for me, buy clothes. The only interesting thing that I really liked about this was that you could switch your outfits out. There's hardly any, I mean, I say outfits, trousers and a top, okay, and you could change your gun belt. I mean, like, it's pathetic. I mean, this game could have really benefited from, okay, they wanted to tell the story from a certain person's perspective. If it needed to be a female character, then great. But let me design her. Her hair was awful. Her facial features were awful. It was off-putting, every single cutscene. It just looked like somebody doing an impersonation of her, not actually what she should look like. The character modeling wasn't very good. And that's fine. You can say, oh, well, that's just the way she looks. That's the way they decided to have her looking. Yes, you could say that. I would say, don't choose route 1. Let's develop the work and do route 12, where we've actually spent a lot of time making her look better. I think a big part of the problem was that every character in this their faces didn't really animate in the way that a human being's face animates when they talk. Like, the mouth would move, but everything was dead from the nose down, other than super glossy eyes, because obviously glossy eyes means they're alive and it's like it's real. But it just looks so weird, and it was the same on every character. And that's when the textures were actually loading up, because there was a lot of popping in this game. And I feel sad, because I know Amy Hennig was a big part of writing a Star Wars game that never came to fruition. There's a lot of things in this that feel like a reaction to that, like the Uncharted influence, etc., etc. And I know Amy Hennig kind of bailed on the Star Wars project, probably because it wasn't quite what she thought it should be. Maybe this is why they wanted to go with it. And she's like, peace, I'm out. I hope so, because they have absolutely flattened it. It's not rubbish by any means. That's the best thing I could say about it. It's not good either. It's just beige. And I think that's the biggest problem. You have this IP. It's one of the best known IPs in the world, along with like Spider-Man and Batman. Everybody knows Star Wars, right? You've got this opportunity to take this IP and do something cool with it. You want to build characters and take people to interesting worlds? Great, that's fine. You don't want to have any Jedi in it? I'm all for that. Take all the space magic out. It's boring. For me, I think that's the worst part of Star Wars. I always say it. The space magic makes everything slightly crap. It's better when it's underplayed and not really used very much, or someone does something and it's like, ooh, special. Not used all the time to like pull ships out of the sky. It's just rubbish. So I'm glad they didn't do that. So their heart's in the right place. But I mean, I don't know. Is this going to get a sequel? Probably. There's so much money been spent on it. They need to make I mean, I don't know how many copies have sold, but yeah, so that's mechanics, that's story, that's character. I mean, the design and everything, obviously, they're just following a kind of tried and tested Star Wars sort of background in terms of lore and how things should look and function. They did that very well. I must admit, some of the environments were really cool. Like where you're going through an old crashed ship and everything was kind of from the Clone Wars, and they've got all the robots sort of shut down and stuff like that. That was pretty cool. And I just feel like I think the problem with this is the problem with Star Wars in general, which is nobody knows where to go with it. It's the same stories but worse every time, and every time they tell them, it makes the originals worse. And that is the biggest issue with this franchise, is that nobody can seem to take it in a direction that's interesting. I mean, The Mandalorian's probably the closest that it's came to sort of like looking at a character that's interesting outside of like the core. But even as those seasons have gone on, they've started to run out of ideas on that, and now there's like more Jedi getting involved and things like that. That it was just more interesting when they weren't. I think the world is more interesting when that's just a sideline of this bigger world. Uh, I know I keep going back to Tatooine and everything. I mean, you can do that. It always makes the games feel much smaller when you're just constantly going, and the films going back to places that that's meant to be like a far off planet in the middle of nowhere. That was the idea of that planet, right? Is that Luke was miles away. Yeah, it's in every game and every film. It's like the center of the universe, not the far off regions. It's just completely bonkers. And also, I will say, if you're going to set up a game where I can go into the cantina of Star Wars and order a drink, please let me play the Star Wars music. You know, the dun, 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 dun. Why wasn't that in it? Licensing. But if you're going to build that game and you've got all this access to all this stuff, just pay the extra money. Have it on the jukebox. Just a bit of it. It doesn't matter. Just put it in there. It's like all this stuff are like it's all nods to what people know and love. And you can show them so much new stuff. But every now and again it's like it's okay to have some member berries in there that aren't totally shoved in. I mean, Jabba's on Tatooine, so I guess that's the thing. And I don't know. I don't know. I just feel like they missed the mark with the writing, and it had such a massive trickle down effect into everything else. It was a shame, really, and part of me feels like I shouldn't have wasted my time. But I do. I keep going back to the Star Wars franchise, hoping that something is going to connect and be interesting, and I just keep disappointing myself. Maybe I'm done. I might be done. I don't know. Possibly. Anyway, so my review of this game, should you play it? I would say not unless it's free. I actually had to buy my copy because I wanted to play it on the PlayStation. If you've got Ubisoft Direct or whatever and you're paying, heaven forbid you're paying £20 a month, whatever it is, you can download it from there and play it from there. I wouldn't waste your time. Well, maybe if it's free, give it a go. But I wouldn't put the 20 hours into it. That's the other problem is that like I'm playing this and there's issues with the gameplay. And there's so many other good games out at the moment that the whole time I was playing, I was just thinking, I can't wait to start Black Myth Wukong. That's all I could think. And as the game went on, and I thought, well, maybe I'll do more side missions and flesh it out. I just couldn't wait to race to the end. And I feel that says everything you need to know about this game, which is that should it have been made? Well, I'm glad that they at least attempted it. So I'm not going to say it was a total waste of time. Should anyone play it? Probably not. Maybe the sequel will be better. I mean, she's not even really an outlaw. She doesn't really do anything that an outlaw does other than just kill like about 1,000 people. She doesn't steal stuff particularly. I mean, her little character does. I guess she does pick things up sometimes if you want her to, but mainly it's your little dude doing it for you. And it just doesn't, you don't feel like an outlaw. You don't do anything that's out. Had the start of this story been that she killed somebody, right? Then she would, in my mind, be like an outlaw, right? So the leaning into that word being that in the old days in the West, an outlaw was someone who was outside of the law. He would have, he maybe was a murderer or like a thief or a bandit or whatever, but essentially a killer. Then make her a killer, but they won't do that. And the reason they won't do that is because Disney. They want kids to play this and feel good about being cave ass, even though she shoots everyone in the face. I don't know. It's mixed messages, and that's the problem with their who shot first, Han or Greedo or whatever. Han shot first because back in the 70s, it was cool to be a badass. Then when they did the remakes and everything, they realized that actually Han's a good guy. So, and then as soon as they did that, it just killed like his character as far as like the attitude that he has and that his upbringing. And they've done the same here, and it just makes it much more bland, which is a shame, but who knows? Hopefully the sequel will be better. I'll probably play that as well, if I'm still alive. Anyway, that's my review of Star Wars Outlaws. That's my rant. I feel better now. I feel much better. A mark out of 10. I have to give it a mark out of 10. I am going to give this a solid 4 out of 10, which is below average and disappointing. Sorry about that, but to be expected. So until next time, be good, stay safe, and be kind to one another. Peace out. We gone!